Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamerspro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. Bronny James, LeBron James' first son, has been making a lot of news over the last few months because LeBron has made it clear that his dream is to play in the NBA with his son, to spend at least one season where he plays alongside his son in the NBA. So there's that. And of course, LeBron is the face of the NBA currently. So every little thing that he does or says, people are going to talk about it. And given the fact that LeBron is the most popular NBA player we have today, it's no surprise that his son, Bronny James, is very, very popular. And, he's been trying to pursue an NBA career to go to the NBA. And there's been a lot of conversation around him, right? And I haven't paid too much attention to him because I generally don't watch any college basketball, but there are people that do. And the talk is that he just went to the combine, he did pretty well. And the talk has been, will an NBA team ultimately decide to draft Bronny, right? That has been the conversation. So what happened? Believe it or not, this morning I woke up and I jump on TikTok, a place I rarely go to. And I'm just scrolling through my feed, just kind of wake myself up. And I see a clip. And the clip says, finally, someone on ESPN is saying the truth about Bronny James. So I watch the clip and it's Mark Spears talking about Bronny James and some news that he heard after speaking to some NBA scouts. So I then go to the internet, to YouTube now, to actually find the full video. And I found the full video. And essentially what happened was Mark Spears was on the panel talking about, Bronny James and his prospects as an NBA player. And then he releases a very sobering analysis from some NBA scouts about Bronny James' prospects as an NBA player. And I was stunned to hear his sobering analysis. So that's what we really want to get into today. So what we want to do now is want to play exactly what Mark Spears had to say about what these NBA scouts have to say about Bronny James as a potential NBA player, and then we're going to come back and really get into the show. Take a listen to what he had to say here.
Mark, you were just in Chicago for the Combine.
Yeah.
What are the scouts saying about Bronny?
Well, they wanted to reserve judgment until they saw him. They did see he was listed as 6'1", and they did see he had a 40.5 vert. But I was like, what would you do right now before he goes and plays? What would you do? And they said, we wouldn't draft him. Both of them said they would not draft him. I said, okay, let me give him a couple days. Let's see what happens after they watch him play. Now, this is their take after watching him play. Scout 1, I still don't think he's ready, but he did some good things. He's on the smaller side, so he's going to have to be elite on defense. You can see he has good vision, makes right passes, takes good shots. He's probably going to need more time. If the Lakers don't draft him, I don't see anyone drafting him. Teams would want him on a two-way, and I don't think Clutch would want that. It gets a little tougher. The other scout I talked to, positional athlete, doesn't function as an elite athlete, tweener stuck between two positions. Should be a point guard based on his size, but he can't run an offense. He's handicapped as an undersized shooting guard because he can't shoot, 0-4 on threes on one day, 1 for 3 the other day. Needs screens to create space, and his only scoring came on paint touch floaters and can only go left. His strength is supposed to be defensively, but he's a switch matchup. Every bigger player who switched on him scored. He's a poor man's Davion Mitchell. He is not an NBA prospect, in my opinion. Not my words of two veteran NBA scouts.
So you heard what Mark Spears had to say there. What are my thoughts about this? Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm being honest with you, this is one of the only times I've heard someone give such a critique of Bronny James as a basketball player. This is the only time. Now, they showed a graphic while he was speaking that Bronny James was listed as 6'4", and then we now find out he's 6'1", but he's very, very athletic with a 40-inch vertical. But usually the conversation around him has been he has a chance to make it. He's very this and is that. And some people have talked about how well-spoken he is, and he is. Let me just say that. And I want to just talk about that for a second, although that has nothing to do with him as an NBA player. I listened to him speak for the first time a few days ago, and the young man seems very, very sharp. Very, very sharp. I was highly impressed. with the way he communicated his ideas. The reason I'm saying that is because a lot of these guys are not as polished as he is, especially at that age. You can tell he's a guy that reads, and he's very soft-spoken, but I like the way he came off. To me, he was refreshing to hear him speak as a young man, as a 19-year-old. So to me, that stood out to me. Although that has nothing to do with him as an NBA player. But based on what Mark Spears is saying, it seems to me that his chances of becoming an NBA player are very, very slim. And if he does, it may be for other reasons that a lot of us have discussed. Is it nepotism? Is it this? Is it that? But I was very surprised to hear that. Why? Because you seldom hear people in media discuss this topic the way that Mark Spears did. He just gave you the cold, hard facts. The cold, hard facts. And if that's what he knows and that's what those scouts know, chances are that's what a lot of GMs know. Now, there's another aspect of this that we need to take into account, which is the monetary aspect of it. Some of you are like, what are you talking about? If a team goes out there and drafts a Bronny James, number one, you're going to be bringing in a big name because he's LeBron's son. And then LeBron has expressed his desire to play with his son. So if you have Bronny James on your team, there is a chance, a probability that LeBron could find a way to get on your team at least for 1 year. And if he does that, it's going to bring a lot of attention to your organization, which is going to increase the value because a lot of people are going to be talking about them. A lot of people are going to be buying the jerseys and all of that. So there's a monetary angle this story has that I think a lot of those teams are weighing. Maybe they may not be weighing it from a basketball standpoint, but maybe with some of the other things that come with it, right? I think another thing worth considering is that given all of the hype and praise and all of the stuff that Bronny has been receiving, maybe some other players are going to be looking like, do you deserve to be on this roster? But if LeBron is there in the locker room, I don't think things like that will be occurring because he'll be the top dog on any team that he goes to. So his son will be shielded away from that. And the fundamental difference, I don't think players would be going at Bronny the way that they were going at Lonzo Ball, for example, because LeVar Ball was talking a lot of trash. So I don't think Bronny is going to get that type of energy, and that's not how he comes off, and that's not how his dad is. But nevertheless, I found this report to be very, very scathing. And the only other person that I heard speak in these terms was just about 2 days ago when Chris Mad Dog Russo, I believe it was on Wednesday on ESPN, where he essentially said, I don't see him being an NBA player. Let me get into this topic here. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Bronny James. We seldom do it, but today we're going to talk about it. And this video was prompted by a clip that I saw earlier this morning that involved Mark Spears basically going on ESPN and explaining what some NBA scouts told him about Bronny James's prospects as an NBA player. Well, on that panel, Kendrick Perkins was also on that panel as well. I think Ramona Shelburne was on that panel as well, and I forgot who else was on the panel. But they were discussing Bronny James is an NBA player. So as they were talking, you could see that Kendrick Perkins started to get visibly annoyed. And as the conversation went on, he kept on getting more agitated. And then at a certain point, he's like, listen, the only reason we are up here talking about Bronny James is because he's LeBron's son. And he said that, look, I feel like we're doing a disservice to other players that are more deserving of the attention to just sit here and talk about Bronny James when there are other players that have greater prospects. And then got into this back and forth. And essentially Ramona Shelburne and these guys were basically arguing for the right to talk about Bronny James because, hey, listen, it makes a lot of money. Because that's the only other reason I can think of them doing it, right? And it got into this pretty awkward back and forth. But Kendrick Perkins was essentially calling out ESPN and a lot of these major networks for basically doing this. He's like, y'all know that he's not good enough, but nevertheless, we spend every single waking hour talking about him. And if it wasn't for LeBron James, who's his father, we would not be discussing him if he had another name on the back of his jersey. And they got into this pretty not heated, but kind of a little bit contested back and forth. So what we want to do now is want to play the full commentary from Kendrick Perkins on this topic, and then want to come back and react to what he has to say. Take a listen to what Kendrick Perkins had to say here.
When I'm looking at Bronny, do I think he could be a pro? Absolutely. He's going to be a role player as a professional. That's okay. I could see his ceiling if he reaches his ceiling of being an Eric Bledsoe type player, but that's in years to come. It's going to be a development process. He's going to have to go to the right organization that's going to be willing to be patient with him. But at the end of the day, right, we're talking about Bronny, And my thing is, I want him to write his own book. And I didn't like when LeBron showed up to the draft combine for the simple fact that if you're trying to detach yourself from him, then you don't show up. You let him have his moment.
Look, here's what I liked. I like that we finally heard from Bronny. I know you did like the first interview with Bronny a couple of years ago at the combine up there, or the Hoop Summit up in Portland. But we have not heard that much from him in his own voice, in his own words. I actually like that he said, that's my dad's dream to play together. Like, I like that he addressed that he knows where he stands. Because until this, we've kind of just seen him post on Instagram. Like, we've seen highlight videos, but he has not spoken for himself all that much. And so I think that's a good sign. I think what I'm hearing, look, he's not a Nepo baby, okay? That's what you're basically saying. Like, he's a legitimate NBA player. Now, is he a starter? Is he an all-star? Not at this point in his development. Can he get a two-way contract someplace? Is that the best path for him? I don't know. I mean, and I think that's where the fact they had a coaching change at USC, that he's in the draft, that he kind of lost some of his offseason and this season because of his health issues. That's where he needs some more time to bake, clearly. But where's the best time for him to bake? Is it in the NBA on a roster where people are invested in his development? Or is it in a college where he has another coach that he feels comfortable with?
You can only make this decision once, right? And I also asked the scouts, does him going back to college improve his draft stock? One of the scouts said, I do think in 4 years or after 4 years, he's a legitimate NBA player. The other one said, no, I just see him as an old senior.
Hey, look, let me say this. We have to stop. We have to stop. As the media and everybody else shining the light on Bronny, because it's other players that are deserve our attention, right? The lottery guys, the guys that are actually that are going to get drafted in the first round. Like, we're talking about a guy, a young man, that's possibly going to go late second round or not getting drafted at all. I've never, in my 4 years of working here, I've never sat on the table where we're talking about a second-round pick.
But this is LeBron James' son, and that is a legitimate storyline that one of the greatest of all times has a son trying to play in the NBA at the same time.
And you have to give Bronny credit for actually trying to say the right things and showing up in the right places. And at the end of the day,
and by the way, I like seeing LeBron in the stands as a proud dad. I like that. That's a great example for fatherhood.
He's the #1 scorer in NBA history.
What does that have to do with his son being at the draft
Scottie Pippen's kid was playing on the Lakers a couple
we
years
didn't
ago.
shine the light on Scottie Pippen's son like this. We can't move the goalposts and feel like we go do it when it's convenient for us.
When we say Nepo baby, that means that you have the same career, parents to child. And so for those
somebody's a Hollywood producer, their son or daughter gets a job.
But if he has the same dreams and he does get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, this is the guy who has. But can we talk about this, y'all? This is a guy who's given his life to the game, LeBron James. And if the byproduct is that Bronny gets a little bit of a nod,
maybe there is though.
Maybe that's okay.
Because right now LeBron is still at the peak of his game where he has the leverage to maybe get the Lakers to draft his son.
And guess what? Maybe the team.
Do you want it that way?
I wouldn't. However, if it's got to be done, that's the only way. That's the only way.
Look, I want Bronny to be successful.
I think all of us do.
But I'm also being a realist here.
Yeah.
Like we're literally spending 10 to 12, huh?
Look, if Stone, my favorite guy, Stone, is at the NBA Combine, I bet you will be working.
I get out of his way. I get out of his way. See, here's the thing, right? Again, we're talking about a young man who's projected to go late second round, early first round. Like, I get it, man, but it's like, damn.
But if we're going to fault the media for talking about it, fault the teams that actually might make the decision.
And I do think there's more teams than the Lakers that would take him.
Maybe not necessarily for his talents right now. It might be
I want to hear from the team.
The overall benefits of
I want to hear from the team.
You don't see.
So you heard what Kendrick Perkins had to say. What are my thoughts on what Kendrick had to say? I think first of all, Kendrick Perkins has been on one over the last few weeks. He's been really calling it like it is, and I've been surprised because Kendrick Perkins used to be one of these LeBron guys that LeBron could do no wrong, nothing like that. And now he seems to be speaking his mind a little bit more. Look, are there people out there that share the same viewpoint of Kendrick Perkins? Well, sure, absolutely, right? And it's the same group of people that wondered, okay, all of these years that the Lakers weren't so good over the last 2-3 seasons, why do we talk about them so much? It's something that you heard Charles Barkley complain bitterly about on Inside the NBA or NBA on TNT on many occasions. The Lakers aren't that good. Why are we up here talking about them? Why are we up here talking about them? Well, this goes in the same vein. Now, they also discuss nepotism. And is nepotism at play here? First of all, nepotism is real, right? In the case of Bronny James and LeBron James, whether or not Bronny James is embracing the nepotism, whether or not he chooses to embrace it, it is working in his favor. Because whether or not you decide to say, well, you know, I'm LeBron James, the fact of the matter is you're LeBron's son. So even though you work hard, and I'm sure he does work hard, you have your dreams, you're working towards them. But if you decided to go into the arena of basketball, which is where your father made his name for himself as a professional, it's going to help you, right? It's going to help you. It's going to work in your favor, whether you want it or not, because you're LeBron James's son. And people are going to take a second look at you regardless. I'm a huge Formula One supporter. Michael Schumacher, who's the equivalent of a Michael Jordan or something like this. He had a son, I think is Mick Schumacher or something like that. I forgot his name. And he started driving for the Mercedes team. Now, ultimately, he wasn't good enough to stay there, and he became like a backup driver or something like that. But nevertheless, his father is still who he is. It's still Michael Schumacher. He's still a 7-time champion. It's still him. So just by them hearing his name, team principles is Michael, they're going to give you a second look. And even if you may not be as talented as they would like, just by the name, it works in your favor. So whether or not you embrace it or not is a totally different thing. Now, in the case of what Kendrick Perkins is speaking to directly in terms of why we're talking about him so much when there are other players that are more qualified, well, I think that's a fair point. I think that is a fair point. But the media has been promoting him. You know, they have been marketing him. They've been promoting him. They always, every time you jump on Instagram, they're posting him on the various pages, Bleacher Report, House of Highlights, ESPN Sports Center, you name them. They're always talking about him. And I think that this is what comes with being LeBron James' son, right? And ESPN is going to continue to talk about him. You heard Ramona Shelburne basically up there fighting for now, the points that they were making about he's articulated and all of that has nothing to do with his ability as an NBA player. That was just pretty sad. I get what they're saying, but we're talking about being drafted for the NBA. That has nothing to how you articulate yourself and how you speak has nothing to do with that. Right? It has absolutely nothing to do with that. But you can see that ESPN, because, you know, Ramona Shelburne, these guys are really arguing for the right to continue to discuss him. And they believe that he needs to be discussed at all times, whether we agree with it or not. It just seems like Kendrick Perkins, however, is beginning to reach his breaking point with this. Right. And now he's just saying what he truly, truly believes. I don't know how higher ups at ESPN feel about someone speaking that candidly about these particular issues. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But nevertheless, that's what he thought. And I thought it was a pretty interesting back and forth that they had on television there. I open my inbox and sometimes I respond to some of the viewers of the channel that follow me on Instagram. And one of the viewers sent me a message, and I don't want to disclose his name because maybe he's not into that. But anyway, he sent me a message and he goes, I saw the video that you did just yesterday talking about, I believe, the JJ Redick video of him potentially, Shannon Fry's comments on JJ Redick potentially becoming the next head coach of the LA Lakers. And then towards the end of that video, I was going to start commenting on LeBron's son, Bronny James, but then I decided to withhold my commentary because I said at the time that, you know, he's a kid and I don't like talking about people's kids. So he's like, I understand your perspective and all of this. And he's like, but I just want to point something out to you. Bronny James is 19 years old. He then said something else. He said, what I've noticed is that when you look at a person like Stephen A. Smith went on a personal crusade to tarnish the reputation and standing of Kwame Brown as an NBA player within the NBA. So he said, my question is, why did Stephen A. Smith feel so comfortable to trash Kwame Brown for all of those years? But when it came time for him to discuss Bronny James, all of a sudden he wants to be a tactician. He wants to be careful about what he says. And I was like, wow, that's a very good point. And it made me have to address it. And I told him, I said, I have to make me think about it that way. And Bronny James is 19. And he is probably going to become an NBA player. It's like, he makes a very solid point. So then I started to think to myself, like, what does he mean? So what I decided to do this morning was I said, okay, you know what? Let's get a quick compilation of clips of Stephen A. Smith basically trashing Kwame Brown as an NBA player. And then we want to show you the juxtaposition of him talking about LeBron James' son and how there's a totally different tone and approach to his method. So what we want to do is we want to first play a compilation of some of the things that Stephen A. Smith has said about Kwame Brown over the years. And then we're going to come back. Take a listen to what Stephen A. Smith had to say here.
Did L.A. give up too much to get a guy who has been labeled soft, although he puts up 19-9, which only 11 other guys do?
Is that a trick question?
You tell me.
They gave up Kwame Brown.
Two
Who
first
cares?
rounders.
I could care less.
Tied into his salary for 4 years.
First of all, understand something. When you're giving up first round picks, if you are a quality team in playoff contention, it really doesn't mean that much. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, Kwame Brown is gone. The city of Angels, Hollywood, just should be celebrated. Throw a parade already, whether you win a championship or not. This man was a bona fide scrub. He can't play. No disrespect whatsoever, but I'm sorry to tell everybody the truth. The man cannot play the game of basketball. He has small hands. He can't catch the ball. He's got bad feet. He can't really move, even though he's mobile. Doesn't really know what he's doing. Doesn't have a post move that he puts to memory that he can do 2 times in a row. He has no game whatsoever. Plays no defense. Doesn't have the heart, the passion, or anything that comes with it. And you're asking me whether they gave up too much? Please, the Los Angeles Lakers knew exactly what they were doing. They should be celebrating right now, and Kobe Bryant should not be saying a word.
But Stephen A., nobody knows how good Pau Gasol is. He's never played in a meaningful NBA game.
But it doesn't matter because he's replacing Kwame Brown. And when you take it to the fact that you're replacing nothing, that makes you something, which is a plus. And that's the way to look at this situation. Kwame Brown, God bless him, is a scrub. He can't handle the ball, can't post up, can't do anything, can't play defense. The Lakers were struggling. They were mired in complete disgust, knowing that they want to break a mediocrity anytime he was on the floor because he couldn't get it done. Now you've got Pau Gasol. You pair him with Andrew Bynum. You didn't give up Lamar Odom either, and you still got Fisher and Kobe? Please. This is a beautiful deal, not to mention the fact that you saved.
Please. The only negative thing anybody ever said about Kwame Brown is that he couldn't play a lick of basketball. Newsflash! That wasn't a lie! When you put yourself and you put your game out there in the best league in the world, people can comment on it because you're putting your talents on public display.
So you heard what Stephen A. Smith had to say about Kwame Brown. You heard it. He didn't hold back. He was calling him a bum. He was calling him a scrub. He doesn't know how to play basketball, all those things. Now, if we look at the case of Bronny James, a lot of people are saying he's not NBA ready. He's not an NBA player. And people can point to his stats, his play, and all of that. But when it comes to Stephen A. Smith, he is very, very reluctant to take a strong position the way he did with Kwame Brown over the years. And I find that to be interesting. So what we want to do is want to play a little bit of what Stephen A. Smith recently had to say about Bronny James and why he's reluctant to critique him. And then we're going to come back and continue on the show. Take a listen to what Stephen A. Smith had to say here.
I don't know that. I'm not saying it isn't. Perk, I've made it. I've done it purposefully. I didn't watch him play in high school. Mm-hmm. All I've ever seen of him was highlights because I knew that the world was going to be incredibly cruel and unfair to him and judging him with an extra level of scrutiny that I don't believe he deserves. His family obviously is wonderful. No matter what critique we want to give to LeBron, and I certainly ain't shy about doing it, one thing I will never deny is what a good man he is, what a great father he is, what a great family man he is, and how much he loves his children, and how supportive he has been for Bronny James. And I don't say this in any kind of negative way, just pointing to reality. Bronny James entering the NBA, putting himself to enter the NBA draft with the numbers that he has, that he produced at USC, combined with his questionable health for the moment, inevitably what that means is that you're doing this because you're Bronny James. You're the son of LeBron James, and that's going to warrant consideration. What they have to understand is that in and of itself is going to invite the exact thing I don't want for him. And that's that extra layer of scrutiny.
So you heard what Stephen A. Smith had to say in both occasions. Before I get to him, let me talk about myself. I think I took the wrong position yesterday by saying I won't discuss Bronny James, because I was looking at it from the standpoint, well, he's someone's kid, and I try to avoid that. But in this particular instance, he's now becoming an NBA player. And if he's becoming an NBA player, and if I'm going to have a position on any player, whether they're positive or negative, if they're an NBA player, they're an NBA player. When I go at Ben Simmons and some other guys that I've gone at in the past, or Lou Williams or whoever, I went at them. I didn't get into the thing, oh, they're somebody's son or whatever. All these people are somebody's son. But in the case of Bronny James, I was reluctant because I was still looking at him as a kid, because we've been talking about him since he's been a very, very young man, a kid. But now he's becoming an adult. Very soon he's going to be 20 years old, and he's going to be in the NBA, whatever. I think he's going to be in the NBA. And therefore, it is fair and in bounds to talk about him and take a strong position the way you would talk about any other player. For instance, last night in a game against the Denver Nuggets, Jamal Murray played like trash. I think he finished that game with like 10 or 7 points. He played like garbage. And I'm going to call him out. And I don't get into the whole thing of, oh, he's somebody's son and all of that. You just call what you see. And in the case of Bronny James, if in fact he's going to be an NBA player, if we're going to be giving him all of this attention like we would give an all-star and any other prospect, then you have to call it down the line and call it exactly how you see it. So I understand his point, and he made me change my mind on that position by presenting that argument. In the case of Stephen A. Smith, why is there a different tone? The different tone is, I think personally, is simply because of this. I said it before and I'm going to say it again. Stephen A. Smith respects power and money. Those are the very two things he respects. And he only goes at people hard that he believes somehow he's above them in some way, shape, or form. That's what I believe. In the case of Kwame Brown, Kwame was a first-round draft pick that didn't probably live up to the expectation that a lot of people had of him. So it seemed like everyone had come to a consensus like, this guy isn't really good, so I can just pile on. And there wasn't any powerful figure that was tied to Kwame Brown that could confront a Stephen A. Smith. But in the case of Bronny James, there is, and that person is LeBron James. And they have a very intimate relationship in terms of ESPN and LeBron and the NBA and all of that. So he's going to think twice and thrice before he talks about Bronny James the way he you think Stephen A. Smith going to come on TV and call Bronny James a bum or a scrub? Or he can't play? You honestly think that's going? It will never happen. Whether if it's true or not, he will never, ever do it. Kwame didn't get spared. In the case of Bronny James, he will get spared, and I think it's because of who he's related to and who he's connected to, and I don't think Stephen A. Smith has the balls to cross the line the way he did with Kwame Brown, and he continued to double down years later.